Good morning, Year 12, or good afternoon, depending on what time you're looking at this. I just thought I'd go through what is going to be our lesson for the entire week. Obviously, you don't need to follow this as you go. You can just listen to this first of all and then make your way through the PowerPoint, or if you want to kind of stop and pause as you go along, that's absolutely fine as well. I just thought I'd go through the PowerPoint because it is a little bit tricky. There's a lot of things I want you to do. And I don't want you to kind of get too stuck as you're going along independently. The file, as you'll see on Teams, you've got the PowerPoint there, you've got lots of documents. I'm going to kind of be using some of them in this tutorial, and you can use some of them in your own time as well. There's some additional reading on there. Obviously, you do have your textbooks at home, which are going to be invaluable during this time period. Thank goodness for the internet, and there is so much out there that you can use. So hopefully you shouldn't feel too disadvantaged at the moment, because you've kind of got most things at your fingertips, hopefully. So our lesson today is kind of looking at the role of Cromwell, and I wanted to start the lesson really by asking the question, who said this quote, "I am Thomas Cromwell"? This was said probably around about 2 years ago now, so recent history. This was quoted by somebody in the American government. If you've already looked at the PowerPoint, you might be aware of who this was. And just to kind of give a little bit of context to this, this person recently claimed that they were Thomas Cromwell. Now, you might look at that in a kind of positive view as, a great administrator, a revolutionary, somebody who is a mastermind, the brains behind the government. You might also look at that as somebody who essentially is called, who is executed, who is betrayed and cast aside by their manager. And so once you start to kind of think about those themes, you might possibly realise who this refers to. Now, for anyone who's not au fait with kind of American politics, many contemporaries talk about how Donald Trump is very similar to Henry VIII. And interestingly, a few nights ago, I watched a programme all about this on Channel 5, which is a TV channel in the UK, and the entire programme was all about how we can compare Trump to Henry VIII. Now, it wasn't actually said by Trump, it was more said by Steve Bannon, who was his campaign manager, who was kind of like the brains behind Trump getting into office. Unfortunately for Steve Bannon, despite being, kind of integral to Trump's success initially, he was cast aside by Trump. And so we start to see some of the similarities in the personality of these rulers. And it's just to get you thinking about kind of how important Cromwell is in all of this story. He's not really there right from the beginning, like we saw with Wolsey. He comes into importance really later on in Henry's reign, but he's definitely key to some of the big changes that have happened. So for you guys, you've studied all about the Henrician Reformation. You know how Cromwell was integral to that. It was his idea, his concept to come up with using Parliament as a way of ushering in all of this legislation to try and legitimise the break with Rome. What we haven't really explored with Cromwell yet is the whole idea of him transforming government. So not just the whole religious issue and the transference of religious power from the Vatican to the English state, but we now need to look at how he also developed the role of government. And so a big debate in Tudors is the extent to which there was a transformation. First of all, was there a transformation that took place? And if so, who can be responsible for that? And some historians, in particular, Elton, has kind of professed that Cromwell was indeed integral to this reform. So just to kind of introduce the topic, and if you want to give Wolf Hall a watch, it might be worth watching after you've studied Tudors, Henry VIII, after you've studied Cromwell, so that you can start to understand the story a bit better. But I would definitely recommend it. It's only 8 episodes long, but I do believe they may be making more episodes, but it's definitely worth a watch. Okay, so if you have a little look through the PowerPoint, I'm not going to take you through every part of this, but I want you to think about what you can see in this very famous portrait of Cromwell. What can we deduce from Cromwell from this? How does he appear? What is his demeanour? Why do you think he's been chosen to be painted with these things around him in the manner that he is? So it maybe tells us what kind of a man he is, and already we know a little bit about him, so we could maybe support that with some of our inferences. So if you want to have a little think over that, you can pause the video, or you can continue on. So historians have explored the painting, and they've said it's actually not a very sympathetic painting towards Cromwell. In fact, it is quite a negative portrayal of him. Maybe it tells us a lot about his character. Maybe it tells us a lot about how he wants to be portrayed. So again, I'll leave you to read through this in your own time. What is he famous for? Well, we know he's famous for many things, and we've looked at some of these already. We've looked at the break with Rome, we've looked at the annulment. We haven't gone into a lot of detail with regards to the fall of Anne Boleyn, but he was definitely integral to that story. So he was a firm supporter of Anne Boleyn in the first instance. You know, she was a Protestant, he was a Protestant, he was bringing in the break with Rome, he wanted to get the divorce for Henry. So, you know, him and Anne were, I would say, allies in the first instance. However, that doesn't last very long, and we kind of see what kind of a character Henry is when he turns on Cromwell, and he does indeed kind of, he does everything in his power essentially to get evidence, to go back to the king, to support this this idea of putting Anne on trial and having her executed. So it's quite a tragic tale for Anne. You know, she's been very much supported by Cromwell, and then she's cast to one side, and he unfortunately provides Henry with all the evidence he needs to be rid of Anne. So there is a little story you can delve into there, and again, it has been documented on Wolf Hall. It's been documented in some of the films as well, with regards to Henry. I think the Boleyn sisters, it might be in that film as well. So the dissolution of the monasteries, we know all about that. The big thing we're looking at today is his reforms of government, and then you're going to look at his downfall. Now, the main reason for his downfall kind of connects to this arrangement of the marriage between Henry and Anne of Cleves. It doesn't go too well. I think I've mentioned before, you know, Cromwell tries to set up this arrangement. Anne of Cleves having a Protestant tradition, a background, and unfortunately it doesn't go very well. When Henry sees his bride, it was not how he expected her to look based upon a miniature painting that Cromwell had of her. So that is kind of a reason for his downfall. But as we know, you know, there's factions, there's people who don't really like Henry being guided by one individual, and I suppose we can see a mirroring here of what happened with Wolsey. But what we really want to focus on over the next lesson or two is his role in government. Okay, so the first activity I'd like you to do, and again, you can pause the video or you can just skip through and come back to this later on, is having a look at the document which is attached, which is also in the folder. So if you have a little look at this document that says table Cromwell, no, that's not the right one, Cromwell card sort, sorry. It will bring up at the top here just the various different statements that historians have said about Cromwell, and what I'd like you to do is just kind of come up with some adjectives to describe him and what kind of a man is he. Now underneath that you have lots of cards here about all about his life, his early life, his time in office, and basically what we want to try and do with this activity is have a kind of divide up the time periods between, you know, any time pre-Henry, any time he was involved in government but under the rule of Wolsey, and then his time just under Henry once Wolsey was out of the picture. So all you need to do for that is colour code the cards. You can just download your own version of this, and then you can just highlight it. It should be pretty easy. You should just be able to do like that, and then highlight yellow for anything that is to do with his early life, etc. So, and then once you've done that, what I'd like you to do is just pick out a couple of the key events in Cromwell's political life. Okay, so anything that shows he's got some kind of important promotion, or he does something of any significance, and then just a brief sentence or two to describe that. So this activity probably will take you maybe 20 minutes. Like I said, I'm going through the entire PowerPoint here, but you will be doing this over 2 or 3 lessons. If you have got your double lesson today, then obviously you'll do this and then you'll carry on through the PowerPoint. Okay, next activity is just a quick recap, and again, you will have touched on some of these things already. You have various different statements, descriptions of events that happened. All I want you to do is match them up. You've got your own Word document to do this. Please don't do this on the PowerPoint, as I know some of you did by accident last week. You should not be touching this PowerPoint on Teams. If you want your own version and you want to adapt it, just download it, keep it on your own system, but please just do not touch or change or amend anything that is on Teams. So that document there, match up events, is really simple, and it goes with that activity there, and then you can see how they match up. Please don't cheat if possible. Okay, so again, I'm not going to talk you through every statement on this PowerPoint, but please do read through what some historians have said, in particular John Guy, who's a prominent Tudor historian, who talks a little bit about how powerful Cromwell was. And then again, this is a recap really. We've done a lot of this in lessons, but I would like you to go over it again now that we're focusing solely on the role of Cromwell. So I want you to really look at what Cromwell does in terms of helping the Reformation, how he helps the marriage to Anne Boleyn. Anything in red is pretty important, you might want to jot down. Again, it just takes you through his role in the dissolution of the monasteries, how he gets involved in all of that. And again, it brings us back to that debate we did before the break. Some of you did it over the holidays, whereby, you know, was this dissolution of the monasteries pre-planned, or was it something that kind of emerged over time? So again, keep all of these themes in mind. Henry VIII is a difficult topic in the sense that there is a lot of crossovers. So we sometimes feel like we're repeating things that we've already done, but it's just the nature of the course. We couldn't possibly do every theme in chronological order, in a chronological approach. You would be too confused by that. So anytime you feel like there is repetition, don't worry about it. That's a good thing. That shows that you know it. It shows that you have the knowledge. So again, go through, have a look at his role in the Reformation, how crucial he was to Henry. But this is the real main topic I want you to look at. And this is the issue of whether or not he was, you know, a revolutionary, whether or not he transformed the government. So there's a lot of historical controversy surrounding Thomas Cromwell, as you can see on the PowerPoint slide. There are two ways of looking at him. Was he simply an able administrator, or was he something more than this? Henry is claimed to have murmured something to the effect that he had lost his greatest minister when he was executed. So maybe there was a little bit of regret there. And I think that reminds me of Henry II and Thomas the Becket. Although it was several centuries earlier than this, it was only after the death of Becket and Cromwell in this instance, whereby the two kings realised, almost in a sense, what mistake had been made. So that insinuates that Cromwell must have been important. He must have been revered by Henry. He must have been valued by him, which again makes you wonder, well, why did Henry have him executed? Was it to do with Henry's state of mind at that point in time? Was it to do with factionalism? There's a lot to debate around this. Okay, second key thing to consider is, did he help to create a revolution in Tudor government? So did he really create a massive transformation? Or was he just a bureaucrat? Was he just somebody who was good at the day-to-day job, but not very revolutionary, not very inspiring, and doesn't necessarily deserve the credit? Now, the key historian to note here is Geoffrey Elton. Geoffrey Elton is a historian who wrote in the 1950s and was a prominent kind of supporter of Cromwell, and has written this huge thesis about how there was this transformation in government under Henry VIII, and that essentially it was the beginnings of a modern state as we know it today. We do know that's not necessarily the case. We know that Parliament wasn't used as much as it is today, but possibly we can see the beginnings of the modern state. And essentially that's Elton's approach in this. Now, there are historians who disagree, and we'll get to that later on. Okay, so as you go through the PowerPoint, what I would like you to do is bring up the table. Again, this is all in the same folder. Now, as you go through the PowerPoint and with your own additional research, I would like you to go through each of these areas of government. So Parliament, Privy Council, finances, local government, social reformer, royal household, and royal control over the kingdom. Now, this covers all of government, and all I'm looking for you to do is jot down some key information about what took place, what happened, and then did it transform government? To what extent was that a big change and why? So you're going to have to really think about what you know about Henry VII, what you know about medieval government and modern day government, and can we see some big changes happening here? Okay. So as you go through the PowerPoint, you'll be able to go back over the theory. I've kind of broken down Elton's theory as much as possible, but what you will need to do is go back to your table and see where this evidence fits. Does it tell us something about Parliament? Does it tell us about the council? Does it tell us about finances, etc.? So you essentially have to decipher where this information needs to go. Okay, so go through, have a little read through, but again, use the additional reading that is in Teams. Now, if you go back to Teams, I have put some additional reading in the folder there, but there is tons of information on this as well. So additional reading here, you will find additional reading in your textbook, and simply by typing in Thomas Cromwell, transformation of government, you will find a plethora of information. At this stage at A-level, we are getting you ready for university. This is essentially what you will do. No matter what subject you study, you will have to collate information from different areas, from different sources. So please don't just rely on your textbook or just the PowerPoint or just a reading. Try and really go to as many sources as possible to just make sure you've got the level of depth and detail. One thing about history is we do not have one book that covers everything. There is no book that covers anything, not for history. You might find that in other subjects like science, etc. But for this, you have to collate from various different places. So please do so. Okay, if we go back to our PowerPoint then, and let's continue through. So you've gone through, you've had a look at the events in Cromwell's life, you've recapped his role in the Reformation, and you've started now to collate information about his role in government and to what extent that was a transformation. So when you kind of get to this slide, you've started to collate a lot of information already. That now brings you on to kind of thinking about the last question on the table, really. To what extent was this a transformation? How much did things change? So what I've tried to do is bring in some critics. I've tried to bring in people like Guy, who have criticised Elton's theory and have said, well, actually, some of these reforms were not as big and not as extensive as we first thought they were. So I want you to really think about that when you're answering the last column. Okay. Now, once you get onto this slide, I'm going to attach an additional sheet for you, which I've had to scan separately. One of the difficulties is that obviously we were unaware of how long school will be closed for, so there may be some adaptations that I will need to make based on the fact that I don't have some of the books with me, but I think I have a scanned version of this, so I will double check and pop it onto Teams, and you should be able to fill out this table. It's really simple. You're just looking through a few different historians. Did they think it was a revolution? Do they not? And just give a little bit of evidence for it. Okay, any problems, just always message me on Show My Homework or on Teams. Show My Homework gets the message to me quicker, but if you message on Teams, if I can't answer the question, everybody can see the question. Everybody could answer it for me if I don't get to it on time. Okay, so that kind of brings us nearing the end of Cromwell. What I'd like you to then do is, in your own words, really bring together everything that you've done, and I'd like you to write a paragraph explaining why you agree or disagree with this argument. Was there a Tudor revolution? By all means, give a balanced argument if you wish, but then try and end upon one side of the argument rather than sitting on the fence. You know, we want to try and avoid doing that at A-level. We want to have an opinion. So try and give as much evidence as you can. I would say half a page would be great for this. As far as I can recollect, this hasn't come up on a paper for a long time, and it is a big meaty topic, so it is one that could come up again in the future. Okay, quick little debate here. Was Cromwell a Commonwealth man? So this is again just something that has been looked at by historians about whether or not there was a change in the attitudes of statesmen at this time, whether they were starting to think about reforming aspects of the society, economy, all in the kind of interests of the common good. So bear in mind what you've explored with Cromwell so far. Would you agree with this view? Again, you can make some brief notes on this, but it's not something I'm going to check. It's just something that I'd like you to consider. And then the last aspect really is the fall. So it's an interesting story. It's all about the marriage alliance or marriage setup. Can't think how to describe it really. Essentially how Cromwell goes about finding the fourth wife for Henry and how it ends up being a complete and utter disaster. So again, read through it, watch some videos on it, watch some clips. There's loads on YouTube. This has been dramatised quite a lot. Now, this last slide is probably going to be your last lesson of the week, and I want you to really spend a lot of time on this slide. You can do this on a Word document, a PowerPoint, I don't mind how you want to do it, but I'd like you to take pictures of your work at all times, please. So what you're doing here essentially is looking at who served Henry better. Was it Wolsey? Was it Cromwell? Who made the most significant gains in each of these areas. So what I'd like you to do, as you can see on the slide there, is just give some information about what each man has done, and then overall, what is your judgment, Wolsey or Cromwell? And then you can start to think about which minister served him best. So for our plenary, revolutionary or minister, I want you to compare Cromwell and Wolsey. I want you to think about how far did each serve the king well, and what similarities and differences were there in their careers. Now for this plenary, I would like you to add your comments onto the posts in Teams. So I want to see really, have you considered both men? Have you thought about what responsibilities they both had and how successful they were? And I want you to think about, can we compare them? Were there any similarities? Are there any differences? So just a couple of sentences so I can see you've engaged in that and you've understood. Okay. So it is a long PowerPoint. I appreciate that. Thank you for listening to me drone on quite a lot. I'm not used to this speaking over the laptop camera type thing. So it's all, I'm getting used to it. And I do apologise if I'm not the clearest at times. Essentially, we just want you to be comfortable. We want you to be happy with what you're learning. This is exactly what we would be doing in class. If you were there, you're not missing out on anything at all. And can I just say, I know I say this a lot, but A-level really is, you get out of it what you put in. The more you put in, invariably, the better the grade you get. If in your work you think, I want to get this done quickly, I'm just going to give a short little summary without any evidence, without any specifics. When it comes to revision, you're going to struggle because you're going to have to go back and do the research again. So the better quality that you do it now, the easier it will be for you in the long run. And like I said, the harder you work, it does translate to a grade. Experience kind of shows us that. So hopefully you've understood what is required of you. Sorry this has been a little bit on the long side, but it is supposed to set you up for the entire week and beyond, possibly, depending upon how long this will take. Like I've said before, if you feel too overwhelmed by work, just get in touch with me. It's a fine balance between keeping up the pace, getting through the content, but not overwhelming you. And for some of you, the pace might be absolutely fine. For others, you may need that little bit longer. So please just contact me individually if that is the case. But I would like to try and get Cromwell finished this week, and I think it is doable. So just get in touch if you need extra time or if you need any extra work, and I will always oblige to give you some. Okay, so we'll leave it there for today. Thanks everyone. Good luck with the work this week. And like I said, I'm just a phone away, I'm a message away. So anytime you want to get in touch, please do. Just not at 7:30 in the morning, because it will be 4:30 UK time. Thanks everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.